And action. Welcome, everybody. It is PnP Weekly, episode 149. In the Microsoft 365 PnP Weekly, we talk about the latest in Microsoft 365 from a news perspective from the Microsoft and also from the community side, where, of course, there's a gajillion amount of articles and all of that happening, but we're raising a few of them for the discussion. My name is Vesa Juvonen. I'm a program manager in Microsoft 365 platform. With me as a co-host is Waldek.
Hey everybody, my name is Waldek Mastykarz and I'm Cloud Developer Advocate at Microsoft 365.
Excellent, thank you, Waldek. So this time we have Rabia Williams, your colleague, actually joining us on that discussion, right?
Correct. Yes.
That was we already recorded that. That was a cool discussion with her related on her career path from joining the Microsoft on this weird pandemic situation and well, actually getting an MVP status and then joining the Microsoft within the past 2 years, which is pretty overwhelming as well. So which is really, really cool. Really cool to have a chat with her as well and catching up on things. But let's let's actually jump, not before, later. Let's actually jump on the discussion with Rabia and then we'll go to the articles right after that. So welcome, Rabia Williams, to our PnP Weekly episode 149. You were actually in our show. I can't remember which episode. We probably should have actually done some background research.
I'm going to look it up.
I know you're well prepared every time.
Absolutely.
And scripted. We actually
Super
go from
scripted.
slide to slide.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Next slide, please.
Yes.
Now, for those who haven't seen you, Rabia, before, can you do a quick intro? Who are you and where you're based on?
So I'm
English hard, you know.
It's okay. Same for me. I'm Rabia. I'm a cloud developer advocate in Microsoft for Microsoft Teams and Graph. I used to be a Microsoft MVP, and I guess that's when I first did the PnP Weekly episode when I just became an MVP. And right now, I think I was probably the shortest lived MVP because I became an MVP. Probably. I didn't even get to do the whole renewal process. Before that, I joined Microsoft. I'm also probably one of the few MVPs who became MVP post-pandemic. So I quite didn't get to experience the real MVP life, the community, etc. But hey, virtual wasn't so bad, but I guess people do tell me that I did miss out a lot of fun. So that's me. I have a SharePoint background, and I was an SPFX developer before I jumped into the whole cloud advocate role.
Yeah, it's been an interesting 2 years for you, right? Because you just said that you started getting the MVP during the pandemic situation, then you moved to Microsoft. So, and you've been working remotely the whole time, right?
Yes, with a very, very interesting team. Waldek is here, so he probably knows our team is so diverse, and it was really a bit interesting when I joined Microsoft because I have never worked remotely except for when the pandemic hit and we had to go lockdown. It was really funny at that time too because we were trying to do a lot of things online. Like in my previous company, we were doing yoga, we were doing Friday drinks and games. So it was a bit different from the actual work process and how I usually had my routine. But then it became my life. We don't have any virtual meetings and drinks. Waldek, we don't. But it became my life.
I blame it on time zones.
Yes, exactly. We're actually in different countries. Every one of us in our team in M365 Cloud Advocacy. But yeah, it was super, super interesting because my onboarding, same as Waldek, we had virtually. We had all these videos we had to watch or trainings we had to go to. So it was a very different experience. I would say I would love to meet people in person. I would love to go to the campus, etc. So it was a big shift for me, but can't complain because I am still in a place of privilege, I guess. During pandemic, I still have a job. So yeah, it has been interesting.
it's been quite a change. Not only the pandemic, but then the roles and everything else. It's actually kind of interesting. And like you said, being an MVP it was so different before the pandemic because we had the MVP summits and potentially even airlifts on site at the campus. So it was a completely different thing. So we'll get there hopefully at some point. So sooner or later.
Yes.
Oh, but I guess it's also a very interesting change, right? Because on one hand, yes, we moved away from the in-person events, and that is a loss. Like for everybody who could attend, like that's a huge loss in building relationships and all of that. But on the other hand, it enabled another audience, another group that were almost never able to come, like people with political issues, visa issues, financial issues, like who were never able to come, and with that, like there was no other way for them to join, right? So they would lose on that experience at all, and now they can join. So it's a lose for some, win for others. But I think we're yet to crack this. Not like like how can we have a really great experience that allows us to be inclusive of everybody, like we do now, but then also have this relationship building aspect to it that we used to have in person.
Sure.
Yes. I think the whole, it was completely, I feel like life before pandemic was completely different. There were a lot of things that does not make any sense anymore after pandemic. So I guess you're right. At some point there's a win, and at some point
flying all over the world to events.
Yep.
I don't know, like traveling. For me, the biggest thing was I worked, I work in the city. When I was working in my previous company, I worked in the city, so I used to travel. And now I feel like before, when I was in the pandemic, I would like love going on train because I can then listen to podcasts or like PnP Weekly or watch videos, etc. And I would keep that time as my me time. And I used to miss that in the beginning. But now I dread going somewhere. So I'm like, I don't want to travel because I'm losing time, because I can spend that probably that 1 hour home, something like that.
Yeah.
So
you could work more, right?
It's one of those things that it might be that within 2 to 5 years or so, we were the lucky ones because we were the ones who got to travel for business at some point. Got to travel because at some point when it goes above certain limit, it's no longer fun. But it might be that we're heading more and more to the direction where the traveling is not coming back, because again, this is working surprisingly well. I haven't seen Waldek for many years, but I still feel connected. So I don't know about Waldek's feeling up towards me, but he's Waldek. So
my feelings are all good.
You have no expression on your face when you said that.
Exactly.
Really? It doesn't come through. There you go. There's some things don't come through, that don't come across digitally, right?
That's true. But so if you think about, for example, my career at some point, I did 26 weeks traveling in Microsoft career, and that's a lot. And it's no longer fun because it's half of the year, and then you stay away from the family and everything else, and you basically travel through the world and even across the world every now and then through multiple locations, and you see airport, hotel, and the delivery location, whatever we were delivering. So is it fun? No, but I got to do that. Now, as an afterthought, sure, it's nice to say that I've been in Kuala Lumpur, Singapore, New York, whatever the locations are. There's a trillion of them. Did I see any of that? No, but hey. So people doesn't necessarily get to have that experience even on the traveling perspective. So, but we'll see. Hopefully, we'll get back to the whatever the normal nowadays means. So
I'm not sure though. I feel like our lives are going more and more digital. I have a feeling that it's never going back to what it was before. There might be a few things we do out of nostalgia, but that's it. Probably we will be more comfortable being digital.
You mean basically the same way, like in the past, everybody used to have a horse, and now it's a luxury thing you do for the leisure, it's basically the same thing, right? Like in the past, there was just like everybody had one, and now it's like, and maybe there will be exactly the same thing for us. Like we used to go to work, or you would hop on a plane or do stuff, and now you're gonna go like, once every other year, maybe, or maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Who knows?
Now, coming back on the that's an interesting perspective, the discussion on the traveling, but let's come back to you, Rabia, a bit. So can you kind of talk about, let's say, top 3, top 5 surprises of when you joined Microsoft? Because I guess a lot of the people, I still remember when I joined Microsoft, and I was so freaked out because it's like, oh my God, they're gonna catch me anytime and they will fire me. But any kind of surprises as you started working on Microsoft?
Oh yeah, like quite many.
Where do I start?
I know. I'm still surprised every week.
Yes, exactly.
every meeting surprises me. But look, so if I have to be honest with you, the biggest surprise or shock was how people speak in Microsoft. So for me, like they put jargon everywhere, like abbreviations, jargons, the complex words. And I was like, every time I would be in a meeting, I would not understand half of the things because I have to go look up in the glossary later. I would write down. And it was so proper. That was the first shock. I had to train myself to probably do these things, CSM, ISI, PPP, I don't know, things like that. So that was one thing that I consistently saw in every single person who've been in Microsoft for more than a year or who has been, actively collaborating with Microsoft folks. Another shock I would say is how my boundaries changed, and that happened very automatically for me. So you basically you know what I'm talking about, time zones and how meetings are set, and how it always, you always think that, I'm going to put a boundary, I'm going to do this, that, but then eventually there are important meetings, important stuff that comes up, and then you eventually go into the pattern of accepting things. So I guess it's kind of like a shady area where I haven't figured out, and it was a shock for me at first that I could actually go in and become so gullible, but I did. So I think these are shocking for a person like me because I started off being remote. This is my first job where I'm being remote and experiencing all this. I don't know about top 5. I don't know if you have got time because there's just so many things.
What about, so I recall when I would first go remote, right? And like the first day, you go upstairs or to your other room where you have your screen, your main work area, and you work, and there's no one around you. Like, how did you experience that? Like that first shift from being in an office with colleagues around you, headphones because you had to cancel the noise, to, well, you're in your own place and you work, you know what to do, or you don't, but it's just you. Like there's nobody to whom you can go and ask. And maybe even in your case, your manager or not, maybe he or she is asleep now. So there's no one even to ping on Teams because it's different time zones. How was that?
It was strange at first, but I guess our work is quite different. We have to be creative in our own space. We get to work in our own mini projects. That is one of the luckiest aspects of our job as a cloud advocate. So a lot of things are something that you do by yourself. And then you reach out to the team, you've got meetings with them. So it wasn't really harsh. I mean, in the beginning, it was a bit, like you said, Waldek, I totally understand what you're trying to say because it was funny because you couldn't reach out for things. But I always had my teammates like you and Bob or whoever it is, everyone ready for meetings. So I didn't feel it wasn't so bad for me. Maybe the onboarding experience was a bit weird. It was just videos or something. So I wish that was a bit better and more in person.
I guess that's the onboarding is weird remotely because typically onboarding would be that you meet the manager, you go to to a lunch, you have a discussion, you interact, and it's different. So
but it was COVID.
Yeah, but I guess even at Microsoft, like the onboarding is different because like part of the onboarding are the new employee, what is the O for? Orientation, NEO?
Yeah.
And you do that with a random group of people who start around the same date. So it's not your own team. You will get salespeople or other folks, and this is your onboarding group. It's like, well, it's cool to see folks who are in kind of the same boat, who are new to Microsoft, but this is not your team, right? So there are different levels of onboarding, right?
True, but that comes from the mentality which we had back in when I joined.
1954.
Yes, right after Normandy's event. But so when I joined, we had a onboarding week in UK, so in London. So basically, all of the new people flew to London and then crossed the different organizations and crossed the different roles and all of that. Basically, we had a 1 week, a lot of presentation skills, a lot of team working and all of that stuff, which was kind of interesting. And it's always fun to do that. And then, of course, actual practicalities on the company. Then after a while, I think it was 2 to 3 years after that, it was changed to be, was it 2 weeks in Redmond? So everybody flew to Redmond. So as a Microsoft University or whatever it is. So,
well, I mean, on the other hand, you got to know all the acronyms.
True.
Not
immersed in them. All of the world. That's why 2 weeks, right?
Yes. And then there's the final exam. Okay, here's the acronym of this and this and this.
Yes.
Yeah, I wish I took that certification.
Yeah. But coming back on the acronyms and something what you said, Rabia, I understand that there's a lot of jargon and business jargon what's happening. But to be fair, at least personally, I'm always thought about that those people who actually push the business jargon too much, it typically means that they don't really understand that either, because they can put it in the normal words. So they're basically, unfortunately, either trying to impress people, or then they're not necessarily quite up to date on what does it actually mean. So, because quite often it's unfortunate, like this happens in every single company, that you're in a meeting and then you're sitting in a meeting and wondering that, are any of these people up to date on what are we trying to do here?
Well, that's shock number 4. But
yeah, I thought that you're too polite, so you don't actually want to call that. But I guess that happens everywhere.
Yeah.
But it's the, I still remember coming back on the joining company and all of that. The at least the mental mindset which I had was that when I joined the company, everybody is just super awesome, the best in the world, and the best possible people out there. And then you realize that, well, these are just people, which actually is a big learning. And then after that, you can start a bit relaxing and then having like, hey, I have a suggestion as well, because you are no longer basically considering you as an outsider, but rather a person in the team, when you realize that, well, wow, they're humans as well. Wow. So
wow.
They are. That is not a part of the onboarding, to be honest.
Of course.
Yes, that's a very good point, Vesa. And I all the teammates or anyone who I've collaborated with, I've always been guided, not just the technical aspect, but as a mentor, who've been in this business for long. They always lend a hand and give us insights into how to work through this company. So yeah, that's amazing to see that people actually care about each other in Microsoft.
Yep. Like that would be a surprise. Oh my God!
Well, I know. No, so maybe to put it in perspective, like the fact, and maybe that is exactly what you mean, Rabia, the fact that like no matter how high someone is, like you can always ask them for a coffee and to ask them stuff, and people are really open to that. And on the outside, it might seem like, yeah, but that is your like skip manager or director of some things. Like, is it okay to ask them? Oh, yes, these are people who at some point went through exactly the same stage where you are. And they're very willing to help, given it's a valid question and not just a waste of their time. And like you cannot force like, I need to know it now, right? Because like they have their own work. So if you have the time and if you have a valid thing to ask, people are very open to take call with you, have a drink or beverage of your choice and their choice, and talk about things you want to ask them.
True.
Yeah.
True. No, that's true.
True.
Now, let's move the discussion point a bit again to a different area. But can you, Rabia, explain for those who might be looking into moving to Microsoft, Cloud Advocate? That sounds fancy. What does that actually mean? What do you do for a living? So, quick recap on that. So,
yeah, sure. I had it all wrong when I joined. When I joined Cloud as a Cloud Advocate, it was a new role, right? I mean, trust me, I'm sure, Waldek, you might have searched in Google as well on the roles and different companies, how they do it, etc. So I had an impression of what a Cloud Advocate is through YouTube, through other, search engines and blogs and things like that. I had it completely wrong. For the first few months, I had it completely wrong. I was doing the wrong things.
And did it click?
It clicked thanks to my manager, actually. We had a very long philosophical discussion on this role after a few months, Barnum. And that's when it was like, okay, it makes sense now. Like we started doing some projects that actually had impact, mattered, things like that. So on a daily basis, it looks like from the outside, it looks like, you'll be writing blogs, you'll be writing samples, you'll be writing contents to educate people. But in reality, I think cloud advocacy or cloud advocates' role is forming connection with people. And when you say connection with people, it's like relationship between engineering team folks and relationship between the community in a way that you have to make sense to both. You have to make sense to the engineering team with what they do. We have to give feedback to them. We have to dive deep into the technological aspects. You have to speak their language to the engineering team. And acronym. And when you're communicating it to the developer community, you have to do it in a way that is appealing to the community. So it's not really just getting up on the podium and just blurting out a demo or just passing through slides. It's actually, you need to know your stuff and you need to have the kind of connection and trust from both the sides in order for you to be impactful. So it was harder than I thought. I mean, I thought it was simple. It was like an extension of being an MVP, but and I would say MVP any day is much easier because we do have the support of the community all the time. You have people like PnP, this community would actually help an MVP grow and, but when you're an advocate, you have to deal with both the Microsoft side of things as well as the community. So it's more challenging.
Sure.
I think that's what I learned from the past few months, which was a late revelation for me. I would say late because for 3 months I was just grabbing all the stuff that was coming my way, all the small events, and I was like, oh, maybe I have to speak for this, maybe I have to speak in this, I was just doing it all wrong. But that was not how actually it's perceived. This role is perceived.
That's actually a really good clarification. Sorry, Waldek. Yep.
Yeah, and I mean, I wouldn't say it's wrong. I mean, it's different, but it still fits, right? Because like at the end of the day, when you say you communicate to developers, well, speaking at events is a form of that.
Yep.
Right, but it's not the only thing. And I guess
that exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes.
And then a while back, there was somebody who said, like, especially when you come to a dev role job, right, and whether that is at Microsoft or someone else, and you used to be MVP or an equivalent of that.
You need to
developer relationship job. So being an advocate, it is it is a dev role. Dev role is a non-Microsoft thing, right? It's a developer.
I'm just trying to explain for those who do not understand that. So developer relationships. So
anywho, right? So if you come to that job and you come from being an MVP or equivalent of that, right? So Google has their own, companies have their own, right? You've been kind of doing dev role job as a hobby in a way. Like it was always a side thing. Like you had your job and then you were an MVP. So there was a side thing and you kind of did whatever you thought was the right thing to do to connect with community. But then when it becomes a job, there are other aspects too, right? It's basically like with anything else. When something is a hobby, you get to choose the pieces you want to do.
Yep.
But when it becomes a job, you get to do other things because that's like everything is a part of the job, right? So like being in develop job, sure, you get to speak at events, you get to write blogs, samples, and code, but you also need to think, is that the right channel and format for a community right now for the thing I want to do, right? So there's this other aspect to it. It becomes one of your tools in your toolbox to use, but then you need to make the connection. Is it the appropriate thing to do now? Because you have more in your arsenal. And there is also, as you said, Rabia, the internal aspect to it, communicating back to product group. And you do that a little as an MVP, but being in a developer job, like you're expected to do more of that because now that is your job, right? So it it expands a little and becomes more of a job with some additional elements that they actually don't get to experience as long as that is a hobby.
Yeah, and as it's a job, you're being measured on those things. Because just to clarify also for those who are not familiar with that, if you're in engineering job in Microsoft, you're not expected to be actively involved in the community and promoting things. Of course you can, but that's not the expectation. So therefore, having cloud advocates is super, super important because they are the link between the community and the engineering. If the engineering teams and in there are organizational differences, which are the PMs and engineers who are actively involved in community, which are not. But in many organizations, they're being measured purely on deliverables inside of engineering, and therefore nobody's encouraging them to be in touch with the real world. So,
real world.
The field. With the field.
That's why we need cloud advocates to be the connection with the real world. So.
And I would also say that when I was an MVP or when I was writing blogs or producing content, I would just think that, oh, maybe this will be fun to do. And like Waldek said, it's a hobby, but you don't think whether this content is going to be impactful or not. What is the problem that this content is going to solve for the bigger community or the larger group of developers? But as a CDA, you need to evaluate and distill whatever tools we have.
An acronym.
CDA.
Well, what is the acronym?
I do understand what a cloud developer advocate is, but yes, so we need to understand what's the impact of this particular blog that I'm putting in. So I think the frequency of how much content we put out has shortened because we don't want to put every week one blog or the other that has probably like 5 views. We want to have more impact. So these are the kind of thought process that goes in your head when you're producing contents, developing contents, which is a drastic change from what you would do as a hobby.
Yeah, and also it is an interesting point, right? Because like we are a part of community, right? So like every advocate, at least at Microsoft, but I guess at large too, like they work together with a product. And that product is in a given stage, whether it's a new thing or it's established thing or it's already on the decline, you know, it's like that, and that depends how active community is there, right? Because like we don't need to create much stuff more because we have active community that does that already, and we can add to it, of course, but it doesn't depend fully on us. Like in comparison, imagine there is new product like let's take for example Microsoft Loop. Like it's not even out yet. When it comes, like it's not established yet, right? So there will be more need for folks internally to drive all of that because it will be new and people will not know as much about it as they know about Microsoft Graph or Teams or SharePoint, because these things have been out already for a longer time, right? So we can we work together also with community who creates also the content that people need, right? And that is also the aspect to factor into which tactics do we want to, like what kind of work do we want to do and need to do to help developers the most?
Sure. Good. From a timing perspective, let's again switch a bit discussions on another important area. So let's talk about actually a bit about the fact that you're a women in IT and the importance of diversity and inclusion. So we talked about, I guess we asked this from you already in the past, but any good tips for career tips for anybody who's watching this one and would like to be in IT? Is IT for women or not? That's a stupid question, I know.
That's an interesting question.
Next.
Next. But let's put it this way. How can we and how should we as a Microsoft and also community improve our behavior around these important topics? Any thoughts on that?
What important topic?
Increasing diversity.
Yeah, it makes a lot of impact. To be very honest with you, having people who look like me in this space is impactful. And I will tell you because I have a little story for this. When I first started off in the user groups in Brisbane, we have the M365 Brisbane group, and it was probably my first ever speaking. So it was around SPFX library, I think. And one person after it was a success, I hope, because a lot of people did have questions. A lot of folks actually did the lab with me. And after the session, a guy came to the podium, and I was like, attending questions personally as well. He came to me, and he was an Indian guy, and he actually told me that he's really proud to see someone like me, and also a woman who's also Indian, standing in the podium and talk to all these folks doing labs with them. And he was really, really proud, and he is so motivated to continue with his IT journey. So that was a small thing, but I still remember that because it does matter, representation matter, because that's when people come out and express their passion or their, what they want to show to the world without actually thinking about how they look. So yeah, it's important.
Yeah, and the looks shouldn't actually matter at all, of course, because it's just no impact whatsoever. Unfortunately, that however still happens, and of course it's up to us to keep on increasing and encouraging these people to be more active and being part of the community. And that, I guess, more and more, if you think about the Microsoft 365 platform community, the PnP community and everything else, everybody is always welcome. And if there's anybody who needs help, just reach out. And there's always people who are willing to help and encourage others and help on the samples. There's a guidance programs even, which are basically helping people to do presentation and doing co-presenting even with the community members. So really trying to help people to be more visible and active. So
yeah.
And if there's, by the way, anybody who's watching, listening, and of course Rabia as well, and Waldek, or anybody, if there's good ideas how we can improve this, those are always welcome, because everybody should have an equal opportunities on these things, and that's what we want to promote for sure.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I would add to this that people who have a problem with the language, I think that's why we need to bring folks up, because it could be any person, any gender, any country, any nationality. And if you've got language barriers, I think that shouldn't be a problem, because at the end of the day, it's what you know about the technology that matters. Not how you can speak about it, because your intelligence isn't. It should never be measured with the language. It's just a language.
Yes, it doesn't have to be perfect Oxford English or any other dialect. So tell me about it. I know. So
that's right.
But yeah. So and to be fair, the language is a really good example. The more people practice and get those opportunities to present, then the language will get better and better, because then that's just how it works. So. I would not listen any of my videos from 2008 or 2009 at this point. So
I didn't either.
I don't listen to anything, and it's not my language.
Oh, that's true.
I don't really have a problem, because I do speak other languages fluently. It's my voice. And it's terrible. I probably wouldn't listen to this. I would just watch it with subtitles.
Yes. Well, but again, that is also an interesting point, right? Because if you're not fluent in a language, would it mean that you would more likely choose, for example, to read as opposed who listen, which might go faster. And if the person like me doesn't enunciate clearly, that you might lose chunks, as opposed to where you can see a transcript or subtitles or even read an article, that it's easier for you to grasp and learn, right? So there's also that aspect to it when we think about enabling others to become part of the community, right?
Absolutely. Articles are important as much as video content.
I think absolutely. And the typically articles are more easily found than video content as well. So even though video is growing, but articles are important as well. So good. Let's do a quick round of what's going to happen. What are the cool things? What are we doing this week with you, Rabia, as well? And then I guess it's time to close up the discussion this time. So anything interesting what you're working on right now? What you can potentially maybe talk about?
I'm actually
interesting. Yes.
I don't know if we can actually say about this, but myself and Bob German were working on a workshop to help developers with Teams application, especially the store side of things. So it's coming up. It's not ready yet, so we're still on the base level of everything. We're working on a nice workshop, probably with labs for the developers.
Cool. That sounds really, really good, because that's for sure something what people would love to have. So more step-by-step guidances and hands-on labs. And when we used to have this in-person, let's say, workshops, that's what people were delivering. So hopefully we'll get back to those at some point as well. Waldek, anything interesting on your table? It's typically we do it with...
A lot.
I can
imagine. So for one, I'm trying to see if there's a way for us to simplify discovery of different resources that we have for developers, both created by us at Microsoft and by community. Like, imagine you want to build an app like a Teams bot on Node. What are the different things that you need, kind of ingredients, tooling, manuals, tutorials, samples, and whatnot, to help you build the bot? So not to try to recreate everything from scratch, because we have that content already, but helping you to find it. So I have an idea around that I'm bouncing off. So I asked a few folks internally for opinion on it. I asked a few more folks externally, and now it's kind of the point where, okay, I want to ask broader audience, does that help? Thinking about last time you build an app, how did you go about finding the research? Like, would this form help? What other types of apps would you like us to create cheat sheets for you so that you can do it more easily, right? And then eventually to the point, okay, imagine we have few of them. What is the best place for us to put them on so that you can easily find them, access them, and then that we keep them up to date, because tools evolve, libraries evolve. So there's also this aspect to it that, well, just because there's a sample, it doesn't mean that that is the sample that shows how to do it today, because maybe between when it was created and is now, things have changed, right? So also trying to keep that as up to date as we can, right? So that is one. And then another one is CLI for M365. We just had a release. We're evolving that as we speak. And we're working currently, like, one of the areas is helping developers to manage M365 apps. And with that, I mean the Azure AD app reg, that is a counterpart that kind of expresses your M365 application in the Microsoft Cloud. So the place where you put your name, location, type of app, how does it authenticate, which APIs it accesses, and so forth and so on. And currently there's this disconnected experience where, well, your app is in your code, but then there are parts to it that you manage elsewhere. And we kind of want to bring that back to your code so that developers can stay in code for as long as they can. And we can try to bring them just the things that they need with as little extra noise as we need to really do, right? So we try to offer something for that in CLI for Microsoft 365.
That's amazing. Especially the guideline idea. I just love it, because I know that when we are actually developing something, especially in M365 platform, there'll be 100 different tabs you have to open, but then you lose where the actual stuff was. So I guess if you've got something like a guideline that you can click and open all the links in one place, that's just brilliant.
I guess we tried some of that kind of a thing at some point. Anyway, that's a separate discussion. Historical
Is there
tests.
anything that we haven't tried over?
That's true.
Over the years?
Yes, it might be that it was too early on that thing. So that's true. But it's
it's coming, right?
Yeah. Well, that's quite often actually is the challenge is not that what you do wouldn't be impactful. It's the timing, or when it's the timing when you're having an idea and sharing that to a manager, being the manager being welcoming on listening that idea and being basically, oh, that's a great idea. It's just the timing and when people are willing to listen quite often, unfortunately.
It's coming on a Monday.
Yes.
A Monday. Yes. A Monday.
Yep.
Good. On my side, just quickly recapping as well. So we're doing actually quite a lot of MVP summit planning already. So for MVPs, there's a private, there's a week training summit planning is ongoing. Then we're trying to figure out how can we do a better job on the Microsoft 365 platform community and the being a bit more proactive on things, which is good. So we're trying to now be proactive in, let's say, multiple weeks advance on the community calls and getting all of that queued up and all of that stuff, which is helping a lot. Last week we had 600 live attendees on the community calls, which is pretty mind-blowing.
600. Wow.
So it's cool to see that reach, and clearly the community calls are catching. So people are willing kind of it's apparently easier when it's it's easier when it's consistent, so people know when the call is happening, and then there's the recording rather than this one-off big bangs, because it's not that you can always allocate that time for a one-off big bang, but having a consistent recurrent thing is something, well, it's happening every single Thursday or it's happening every single Tuesday. It's easy to drop in and see what's happening. So
cool.
But a lot of planning on that side and making these things more visible for the community as well and accessible. But anyway, I guess that's it for now. So thank you, Rabia, joining again. We'll catch you again on the show within 2 years or so.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for calling me back. I thought it was a one-off thing, but hey, thanks.
No, it never is.
All right.
We absolutely want to always catch up on what's happening, and you have a great storyline as well. And so it's just amazing to think about that you joined, getting an MVP and joined Microsoft during the pandemic time. So it's a bit different. So
thank you.
But thank you, Rabia, for joining, and we'll jump to the weekly articles from this interview with Waldek. So cheers.
Thank you, Rabia. Bye.
Cool. Thank you, Waldek.
This is going so well, right?
Thank you, Rabia. You two look like
thank you, Vesa.
Size, I confused.
Thank you, Vesa. Yes, So with that, we thank each other, which is good.
Yes.
Now we're up to the articles.
Yes, let's jump to the articles. Thank you, Rabia, for joining us on the discussion. Really cool to catch up, and it is absolutely a pleasure to work with you on a weekly basis or so on the platform. So it's really cool to see all of the stuff what is coming out from the Cloud Advocates. Compliment for you as well, Waldek. So
thank you, Vesa.
You're welcome. Now let's actually jump on the articles of this week. Let me not stop recording. Let me actually
don't
Monday.
Stop. Thing.
Okay, so first few Microsoft articles, and then we'll go to the community articles. So let me start with this one. So most used SharePoint solutions from the store, December 2021. So we started this monthly summary on listing top 10 most used solutions from the SharePoint store, which actually includes nowadays also the Viva Connection applications. So and also this is the complex thing which we're working on internally, which is if you build an SPFX or SharePoint framework solution, for Teams, it's actually in the SharePoint store. So it's bit confusing, but something which is getting worked on for sure. But this is a good blog post related on who are the top 10 providers right now from the store. A lot of our partners and system integrators, ISVs, are not using the store yet, and we're hoping that that will change in the future. But Graph is by far the most widely used provider, and it is really, really, really cool solution for SharePoint and for Microsoft Teams. So highly recommend on checking it out. And then there's multiple other solution providers here as well, which is really, really cool capabilities. Now, the next article.
Absolutely. So last, I believe, week, we had an article from Brian from the Microsoft Graph CPX team about the ability to upload large files with the Microsoft Graph, right? And the interesting part there is the large file, because file size exceeds the payload size that you could squeeze into a single request. So with that, there is a special way on Microsoft Graph that allows you to chunk the upload. And with the Microsoft Graph.net SDK, there's a new improved way to handle that. Sure, you could do all of that with the REST API from Graph, but it's just so much easier to use the SDK. And Brian shows us exactly the improvements and the, let's say, the easiest way to upload a large file with the Microsoft Graph.
Yeah, really cool stuff, and making it super, super easy to handle large files. And basically, I guess it's hundreds of megabytes of file. I don't know if we actually provided.
It's going to be as big as you need to, right? I mean, you can have files in terms of gigabytes, right? Even so.
Yep. Makes perfect sense, which is awesome that we have a simple way of uploading those stuff. Now, on the Microsoft 365 platform blog, we had an update related on new single sign-on service for Office add-ins, which is rolling out in the Office on the web. So if you're building Office add-ins, there's a new way of doing simplified single sign-on, which requires a certain level of changing and updates on your solution. So that blog post is all about calling out those needed changes and the steps and articles of making that happen. On the syntax side, SharePoint syntax side.
Exactly. So again, we have an enhancement around syncing content types across sites, right? So if you think about it, content types allow you to organize content and apply metadata to it. But then you also want to have, if you change the content type in single place, the same content type should look the same way across all sites. So there is the ability to keep them in sync. And then there is an approved API, again, on Microsoft Graph, which is the go-to API to communicate with anything on Microsoft 365. There is an improved API to handle changes across content type and across sites.
Yeah, really, really cool. So add a sync copy of published content type from a content type hub to a target site or a list. So that's basically the main operation. And then if you add additional operations, which are available as well. Really, really cool stuff. Then on the syntax side, there was an update from Chris McNulty related on syntax licensing and a few other, let's say, upcoming features. And there's some adjustments on the syntax licensing, making it easier for non-paid license customers to start using syntax features. So we highly recommend on checking it out. Syntax is really the content management services of the advanced content management services of SharePoint. So and there's a lot of investments on that side. Related on the syntax, we also had a high-level, let's say, reference article on the content assembly.
Exactly. So as you work with syntax and content, your documents will go through cycle, right? And Chris in his blog explains the different steps that are included and how you can think of them to be able to better explain it or even grasp it yourself.
Really, really cool. So explaining the extraction and metadata and automation and all of that stuff, what the syntax is doing. Really, really cool stuff. Then we had a blog post from Adam Wojcik from CLI for Microsoft 365 on your mobile. So actually kind of a cool setup. So if you're looking into doing automation directly from your mobile within a Microsoft 365 tenant using the CLI, you can easily do that. And he walks through the process of installing the needed tooling to the Android mobile and then starting using or automating your tenant. So actually pretty cool setup.
That is pretty cool.
Then we had
another article on Adam talking about different tools, in this example, PnP PowerShell or CLI from Microsoft 365, which are both command line tools to automate working with Microsoft 365 tenants, right? And he gives his opinion on whether you should use one or the other, how do they relate to each other, and so forth and so on. So it's interesting article to get perspective on that from him, how he looked at these tools.
Yep, it's good to have opinions for sure. And then there's a good level of a thought process related on his recommendation as well. So we had an article from Jan Bakker related on Microsoft 365 self-service using Power Apps. And so this is a kind of a reference solution which has been built to manage the Microsoft 365 setting, kind of a self-service portal for the Microsoft 365 end users. So really cool setup and relatively complex setup from a automation perspective, but makes it look easy as a UX in the Power App side of the house.
Then we have article from Michael Roth about working with custom connectors in Power Platform, right? So the idea is that you're building either a Power App or a flow, and you want to connect to an API, and there is no connector for that API available to you. So you have basically two ways. You can either use the HTTP call and instrument everything in place with auth and whatnot, or you can build a connector and make it a more reusable approach. So he discusses the two different options that you have and how they relate to each other, as well as showing step by step how to go through building a connector for an API.
Really cool blog post. And we need more and more of this kind of a getting started guidance anyway, because I think it's always, that's how we get new people to learning on how to get started on doing. Working with APIs on Power Platform for beginners. This is kind of a related or partner article or sibling article for the previous one. Talks about the calling the APIs and the get and post and put and batch and delete operation, HTTP and those options. So really cool stuff as well to explain the differences of those APIs. So really good job from Michael on that.
Then we have another article from Leon Armstrong, and it's about the ability to access sites in SharePoint without the need to have to access the whole tenant, right? So in the past, if you think about it in the past, the way you would access SharePoint was you either had access to everything or nothing. Before that, even way earlier, we had the ability to grant access on a per site basis, but that has changed when we moved to Azure AD based access, because with that, there was only one scope or two, read all or full control, right? There was nothing in between. And now, since recently, we have this new ability which allows you to grant access to apps for specific sites. So we're kind of back to this original control to be able to access a single site, as opposed to every app has to have access to either everything or nothing at all. So this is really cool.
And the big change here is really the fact that we used to have the scope, which is the sites that selected for Microsoft Graph, but we didn't have it for the CSAM and REST APIs. And that's now enabled since end of November, and it's available for SharePoint resource as well. So that's really the change. Within recent, or that's the recent change. English is so hard. I just Now, Vartman Deshpande from Valo Solutions had a blog post related to working with apps with Microsoft Teams meeting. It's really focused on the different Teams meeting scenarios and what kind of implementations you can actually do there during the meeting or pre-meeting or post-meeting, and how to get started on those things as well. So really cool stuff from Vartman. Then we had from Xiao.
Right, so he has a great article about showing like how can you build a to-do kind of experience, to-do being the to-do app of Microsoft, building kind of similar experience on top of a SharePoint or a list, right? So to basically give the same kind of UX on top of a list that you could use to manage your tasks.
I'm going to tease out and show the picture in the video format, how it will look like. I guess it's actually no, it's not here. Where is it?
Somewhere.
Is it in the previous article? No, I just want to have the outcome, not the template.
You cannot have the outcome.
I need to have the outcome. I need to show it looks really polished. I can't find it. Sorry, Xiao. Have a look on the article. There's a video as well on the article series, and really cool stuff for sure. So really going the deep end with the Microsoft list formatting. So really cool stuff. Then we had an article from Markus Müller related on configure Teams tab applications, so configuration options and scopes and all of that stuff, and how to get moving on those. So really cool blog post from Markus as well. He's been really blogging a lot about Microsoft Teams platform, which is great. And then article from you, Waldek.
Yes, exactly. Right. So when you build apps connected to Microsoft 365, there is this app, which is in your code, but then there's also the counterpart to it. You register your app with the Microsoft Cloud, and you do that by creating an Azure AD app reg, right? And that is kind of a piece of info that you have with application's name, location, type, API access, and whatnot. And these kind of tools are disconnected in a sense, right? Because you have your own code, but the app reg lives in AAD. And with CLI from Microsoft 365, we want to kind of bridge the gap and allow you to stay in code for as long as you can. So we want to bring the ability to manage all aspects of this app, like permissions and properties and whatnot, directly from the code, where you can, in your code editor, open terminal and manage the app without having to leave the editor and switch context. So here in the article, I'm showing how that works step by step. And then I also share some ideas that we have for new commands that we plan to add over the coming days.
Cool. Really, really cool stuff. And making things easier is always good. So don't make things more complex. Make it easier. Now, Peter Venstra had a blog post related on set the task priority in Microsoft Planner using Power Automate and a few of the options over there. And bit of a confusing API description as well, because there's multiple API options and let's say not a super clear communication on what is the priority value, what you should be adding. So really interesting blog post from him related on that. Then our good friend Paulo had a YouTube video.
Exactly. He is explaining how to manage share files via Microsoft Graph. Again, example, Microsoft Graph being the API to manage everything on Microsoft 365, and managing shared files is one of the options that are exposed to us through the Microsoft Graph, giving you a consistent approach to do basically as much as you can in your apps with the Microsoft 365.
Cool. And then April had a new video related on Power Apps collection basics. So basically walking through the different collection access, what is a collection, why would you use a collection, and then how do you render and take those in the rendering into account. And I think she's using the Wordle scenario here, because that looks like Wordle, which I already muted completely from my Twitter account, because that came to be a bit too much Wordle things in Twitter. So
yeah, but
it's a good scenario for showcasing the learnings and how to implement applications using the platform. Then we had a blog post from Joanna Klein from Recording 365, role touch points during information governance and records management implementation. So Joanna is really the specialist on the records management, information governance, and the, let's say, the business side of this discussion. And this is a good blog post related on the aspects and different roles and responsibilities, what different people might be having and how they overlap, and who are the people who make different decisions in different organizations. It's an interesting challenge to find specific people making always responsible of certain areas. So really, really good stuff, and some recommendations and tips in there. And then we had the last article, or video technically, from Sarah.
Yes, exactly. Where to share important corporate documents. I guess that is the challenge that we all have. Like when you think about different scopes in which you can share with another person, you can share within your team, within your org, maybe with external folks. And what are the different things you need to take into account when thinking about sharing lifecycle access, permission management, and whatnot? So I guess that there's more to it than just clicking share.
Yeah, absolutely. It's where are you storing the file, and how do you access that? Do you move it at some point? Where, and all of that. So it's an interesting. There's no right or wrong as such, but there's multiple different options in all of these things for sure. Yeah. Good. Let's actually then close up for this week. So we already talked about what's happening within this week, kind of the key points.
Yes, we have.
Yes, we have. I guess
Yes, we have.
we have nothing else
on
left
that
to
bombshell.
say then. Thank you, Rabia, one more time joining us this time. We'll be back within the PnP week in the podcast and in the vlog format within a week. Thanks, everybody. Please stay in touch. Use the hashtag PnP Weekly to tag your stuff in Twitter so we can cover them in the show. Thanks. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.